In the third year of her marriage to Harrison Sullivan, their marriage certificate was accidentally ruined, soaked through with coffee. Aria Bennett took the damaged document to the civil registry office for a replacement. The clerk tapped a few keys on the computer, then suddenly looked up at her. "Madam, our system shows your marital status as unmarried." She froze, thinking she must have misheard. "That's impossible. My husband and I received our certificate right here 3 years ago." The clerk checked again, her expression turning peculiar. "The system indeed shows you as unmarried, but Mr. Harrison Sullivan is listed as married." She paused. The name registered as his spouse is another woman, a Chloe Winslet. "Do you know her?" Aria Bennett's mind exploded with a deafening buzz, leaving only a sharp, ringing tinnitus in her ears. Everyone knew that Aria Bennett and Harrison Sullivan had grown up together. She was the pure, cherished memory of his youth, the one he had carefully protected since they were young. And Chloe Winslet was the replacement he had found during the 2 years Aria was abroad, because he missed her so desperately. Clutching the coffee-stained, fake marriage certificate, Aria Bennett stumbled numbly into her car. Her phone vibrated twice. A message from Harrison Sullivan popped up. "Darling, I skipped a 10 billion deal. Bought your favorite roses and strawberry shortcake, just to come home early to be with you. I miss you so much. Do you miss me?" She stared at the message and suddenly laughed out loud. The laughter continued until tears streamed down her cheeks. For 3 years, he had asked her the same question daily, professing his love. But all along, he had already legally married someone else in secret. She remembered when they were children, Harrison Sullivan had fallen from a 3-meter-high tree while trying to retrieve her kite, fracturing his right arm. Yet, he still smiled and handed her the kite, saying, "Don't cry, Aria. It doesn't hurt." She remembered her 15th birthday, when he stood in the rain all night beneath her window, just to be the first to wish her happy birthday when she woke. She remembered their 18th birthday, when he rented out the entire amusement park and knelt amidst the fireworks, saying, "Aria, when I turn 22, let's get married, all right?" She remembered when she went abroad for studies. He pressed her against the airport wall, his eyes red-rimmed, voice trembling. "2 years. I'll only give you 2 years. When the time's up, I'll come and bring you back myself." During those 2 years abroad, he demanded video calls almost daily. Once, she was busy with her thesis and didn't answer his calls for 3 days. When they finally connected, she discovered he'd been hospitalized for alcohol poisoning. His eyes were bloodshot in the video. "Darling, I can't live without you." She always comforted him. "I'll be back soon. Just wait a little longer." On the day she returned, she didn't tell Harrison, wanting to surprise him. But when she pushed open the door to the private room of the club, she saw him kissing a girl with shocking passion. The girl's profile was strikingly similar to hers. Her handbag fell to the floor with a thud. She turned and ran. Harrison Sullivan chased after her like a madman. When she didn't answer his calls, he sent endless messages. When she refused to see him, he stood in the rain outside her building, explaining over and over, "It wasn't what you think. All these years you wouldn't let me visit you. I missed you so much. So I found a replacement. I swear, we only kissed, nothing else happened. Aria, I was wrong, but I love you to the point of madness." Finally, he stood in the rain for 3 days and 3 nights, developed a high fever that turned into pneumonia, and collapsed. Even after being hospitalized, he refused to stay unless she forgave him. Eventually, her heart softened and she took him back. Afterwards, he treated her as well as before. Until after they were married, she discovered his new assistant was Chloe Winslet, the replacement he claimed to have sent away. He explained again, "Her parents are ill. She couldn't settle abroad. She begged me, crying, to let her return to Jingbai. She applied for the assistant position. I had no idea it was her. Her work competence is excellent, and she was hired through the proper process. I can't just sack her without reason." So, she tolerated it once more. Little did she know that this tolerance would turn her into the biggest fool of all. By the time the car entered the villa estate, Aria Bennett's tears had dried. She took a deep breath and was about to push the door open when she overheard a conversation in the living room between Harrison Sullivan and his friend. "I just visited the hospital. Chloe Winslet is fine. Just a few scratches. You can relax and stay home with Aria Bennett." Harrison Sullivan lounged on the sofa, his black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, long legs crossed. He frowned and stubbed out the cigarette in his friend's hand, his voice low and cold. "How many times must I say it? No smoking in my house. Aria hates the smell." All right, you doting husband," his friend teased. "But I really don't get it. If you love Aria Bennett so much, why did you insist on legally marrying Chloe Winslet? Honestly, tell me, didn't you see her as more than just a replacement?" The air grew still for a few seconds. Then, Harrison Sullivan's deep voice came. "So what if I did? I used to think she was just a replacement, that I wouldn't need her once Aria returned. But after she was sent away, I dreamt of her almost every night. Eventually, I couldn't stand her not being near me. So I brought her back as my assistant. I can't live without Aria. But Chloe, I can't let her go either. Aria can enjoy my open affection, while Chloe can only linger in the shadows, giving her the legal title as compensation." "What of it?" His friend sighed. "Aren't you afraid Aria Bennett will find out? With her temperament, if she knew, even if you died in front of her, she wouldn't look back." Harrison Sullivan was silent for a moment, his Adam's apple bobbing. Then she must never know. Standing outside the door, Aria Bennett felt her blood run cold. She thought she would break down and sob, but found she couldn't even shed a tear anymore. So, this was what extreme pain felt like. It felt as if a piece of her heart had been gouged out, yet it stubbornly continued to beat. She remembered how Harrison Sullivan had gently kissed her forehead before leaving this morning, how every time he came home drunk from a business dinner, he would hold her and murmur, "Darling, I can't live without you." How he would cradle her cold hands against his chest, saying, "This heart beats only for you." It was all a lie. On her way back, she had even wondered if he had some hidden hardship. Now she knew. He had simply fallen for two people at once. What he wanted was never to choose one, but to keep one as his cherished memory, and the other as a passion of his present. Fine, since Harrison Sullivan was so afraid of her knowing, she would show him what it truly meant to never look back. She turned and left, directly doing two things. First, she went to apply for the deregistration of all her personal identification information within the country. Second, she changed her name. She was informed that all procedures would be completed within 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, even if Harrison Sullivan searched heaven and earth, he would never find her again. Aria Bennett turned and left. Her phone vibrated incessantly in her bag, missed calls and messages from Harrison Sullivan. She didn't look. She didn't reply. By the time she returned home, it was already dark. Harrison Sullivan stood in the living room. The moment he saw her, he strode over, clear anxiety in his eyes. "Darling, where have you been? I came home and you were gone. I've been waiting for hours. I nearly turned the whole city upside down looking for you." His concern seemed genuine. Aria Bennett stared at him blankly, her heart feeling as if an invisible hand were squeezing it tightly. She suddenly remembered high school. When he was away at a math competition, she was merely an hour late replying to his message, and he abandoned the competition to rush back. Terrified something had happened to her. The man who had loved her so deeply, the love he gave was not unique after all. Her throat felt blocked, every breath laced with a fine, sharp pain. Yet, in the end, she only spoke calmly. "I went shopping. I forgot to tell you, sorry." Harrison Sullivan finally relaxed, pulling her into his embrace. "Why are you apologizing to me? I'm not blaming you. I was just worried." He bent down, kissed the top of her head and said gently, "All right, darling. You mentioned the other day you wanted sweet and sour pork ribs and steamed sea bass. I'll cook them for you, all right?" After saying this, he released her and headed into the kitchen. Aria Bennett stood at the doorway, quietly watching Harrison Sullivan. He had rolled up his sleeves, his slender fingers deftly chopping vegetables. His profile looked exceptionally tender under the warm, yellow kitchen light. She suddenly remembered, 3 years ago, just after she returned from abroad, she was hospitalized with severe stomach issues due to long-term irregular eating. Back then, Harrison Sullivan, a billionaire CEO who had never set foot in a kitchen, spent a whole month learning to cook from a top chef. Once, an international video conference conflicted with the time he was supposed to cook for her. He simply set up his tablet in the kitchen, stir-frying while listening to reports, startling all the executives present. He had loved her so deeply once, but at that moment his phone rang. Aria Bennett saw him glance at the screen, his expression changing slightly. He immediately put down the knife and wiped his hands hastily. "Darling, there's an urgent matter at the company. I need to go in." He took off his apron, his tone normal, even remembering to bend down and kiss her forehead. "I've already finished 3 dishes. You start eating. Don't wait for me." Aria Bennett didn't speak, merely nodding after he left. She walked to the dining table, looking at the steaming dishes. She suddenly found it hard to breathe, her heart aching fiercely. She had seen clearly. That call was from Chloe Winslet. Instead of eating as he wished, she went out, hailed a taxi, and followed him. Sure enough, Harrison Sullivan wasn't heading to the company, but to the hospital. In the corridor of the hospital's VIP ward, the entire floor had been cleared. Only a few doctors and nurses stood nervously outside her room. The hospital director was bowing, speaking obsequiously to Harrison Sullivan. "Mr. Sullivan, our deepest apologies. It was our negligence that caused Miss Winslet to fall in the bathroom. We will definitely assign more cares. Such a mistake will not happen again." Harrison Sullivan's face was dark, his voice cold as ice. "If there was a next time, this hospital won't need to remain open." The dean nodded repeatedly. Yes, we will definitely pay attention." Aria Bennett stood around the corner, her nails digging into her palms. His friend had clearly said Chloe Winslet only had minor scratches. Yet now, for minor scratches, he had booked the entire floor, and over a small incident, was so tense he seemed ready to tear the whole hospital down. The ward door opened. Chloe Winslet leaned weakly against the bed, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. Harrison Sullivan hurried over and took her hand. "How are you? Does it still hurt anywhere?" Chloe Winslet's eyes welled up, her voice choked. "It's all my fault. Getting hit by a car was bad enough, but then I had to go and fall in the shower. Now I've taken you away from Miss Aria. What if she misunderstands? I'm such a jinx." "Don't talk nonsense," he chided softly, yet his tone was gentle. "Focus on recovering. I'll stay here with you these next few days." Chloe Winslet lifted her teary eyes. "What about Miss Aria?" Harrison Sullivan said flatly. "I'll make arrangements. Don't worry about it." After a pause, He added, "We are husband and wife. Isn't it only natural that I accompany you?" Arya Bennett felt her blood freeze instantly. Husband and wife. What a perfect pair. But before she could process it, she saw Harrison Sullivan take the Buddhist prayer beads from his wrist and gently place them on Chloe Winslet's hand. "And from now on, don't call yourself a jinx. These beads have been blessed. I've worn them for 7 years. You wear them now. They'll keep you safe and sound." Chloe Winslet was moved to tears and reached out to hug him. Standing outside the door, Arya Bennett's vision blurred, feeling as if she were drowning in deep water. Those prayer beads, she had knelt and kowtowed all the way from the foot of the mountain to the temple at the summit to get them when she was 18. It was raining heavily that day. She knelt until her knees bled and her palms were raw before finally receiving the abbot's blessing. When Harrison Sullivan saw her disheveled state upon her return, his eyes instantly reddened. He pulled her into a tight embrace, his voice trembling. "Arya, have you gone mad? Who asked you to suffer like this?" She smiled, putting the beads on his wrist. "The abbot said these beads will keep you safe, sound, and grant you a long life." He kissed her and said, "I'll wear them for a lifetime." For the following 7 years, he truly never took them off. Even in the most formal business settings, the most intimate moments, those beads remained on his wrist. But now, he had personally placed them on another woman's wrist. Her heart felt as if it were being slowly sliced open by a blunt knife, the pain making it hard to breathe. So, his lifetime only lasted 7 years. She turned and left, her steps unsteady as if walking on cotton wool. By the time she returned home, it was late. She had just entered when her phone vibrated. A message from Harrison Sullivan. "Darling, something urgent came up at the company. I have to go abroad for a few days on business. Don't be angry, I'll make it up to you when I'm back." Arya Bennett stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, trembling slightly. She typed out a line. "Is it a business trip for a few days? Or are you accompanying your wife for a few days?" But in the end, she deleted it word by word. Tears fell on the screen, blurring the words. She began packing passports, bank cards, anything that could prove her identity. She packed into her suitcase. 3 days later, Harrison Sullivan returned. He pushed the door open, holding a large bouquet of roses in one hand and a strawberry cake in the other, a gentle smile on his face. "Darling, I'm back." Arya Bennett stood in the center of the living room, quietly watching him. He walked over, placed the flowers and cake on the table, and reached out to hug her. "Things at the company have been incredibly busy lately. The trip abroad was unavoidable. Otherwise, I would never have left you for so long. Don't be angry, all right?" She sidestepped, slightly, avoiding his embrace, her tone calm. "I'm not angry, you can attend to your matters." He paused, then smiled. "It's all handled. Everything that needed doing is done. Next is to coax you." He took her hand, anticipation in his eyes. "I prepared a surprise for you." Without waiting for her response, he led her to the car. Half an hour later, the car stopped in front of a concert hall. As Arya Bennett entered, she found the entire hall had been privately booked. The surrounding seats were filled with people who, upon seeing them, began whispering, "Mr. Sullivan is so extravagant, booking the entire hall for Miss Arya. I heard he specially invited her favorite orchestra from abroad. They'll be performing a dedicated repertoire just for her today. That orchestra's value has skyrocketed now. A conservative estimate puts this at over $1 billion. At least. What's that compared to Mr. Sullivan's renowned devotion to his wife?" Arya Bennett stood under the dazzling lights, surrounded by envious whispers, facing Harrison Sullivan's gentle smile. Yet her heart felt as if soaked in ice water, aching with cold. He gave her a grand romance, but gave another woman the legal title of marriage. He let her live under the admiring gaze of the crowd, but let another woman occupy his marriage certificate. Arya Bennett sat in the VIP seat at the concert hall, the melodious strains of the violin in her ears, Harrison Sullivan's gentle smile before her. He leaned over, adjusting her shawl, and asked softly, "Are you cold?" She shook her head, but instinctively frowned as a cramping pain shot through her lower abdomen. Harrison Sullivan noticed immediately. "Is it your period?" Feeling the familiar flow, she nodded, his warm palm pressed against her abdomen, gently massaging. His tone apologetic. "Is the pain bad? Should we go back?" Arya Bennett shook her head. Harrison Sullivan, unable to persuade her, called his assistant to bring sanitary products and a heat patch. During this time, his attention remained entirely on her, now massaging her stomach, now asking softly if she needed hot water, or a blanket, attentive as if she were still his most treasured possession. Half an hour later, someone hurried over and called out softly, "Mr. Sullivan, the items are here." Both Arya Bennett and Harrison Sullivan turned simultaneously. It was Chloe Winslet. She held a paper bag, her hair slightly damp, face still somewhat pale. Harrison Sullivan's expression instantly changed. "Your injuries have just healed. Who told you to come?" "I asked for Ethan Hayes." Chloe Winslet bit her lip, her voice soft. "Ethan Hayes is finalizing a project. I was afraid Miss Arya was in pain, and worried you might be anxious waiting. So I came myself." As she spoke, she carefully handed over the paper bag, adding, "It's pouring outside. I forgot my umbrella. But don't worry, I kept the heat patches and sanitary products completely dry. Not a drop of rain touched them." Harrison Sullivan's expression shifted several times. but he ultimately took the bag first and handed it to Aria Bennett. "Darling, I'll accompany you to change." Aria Bennett said nothing, taking the items to the restroom. When she came out, Harrison Sullivan, who had promised to wait outside, was gone. She was about to leave when she heard faint noises from the adjacent restroom. She walked over and looked. Harrison Sullivan had Chloe Winslet pressed against a sink, kissing her deeply. Chloe Winslet half-heartedly resisted. "No, Miss Aria is still waiting for you. Leave her for now." Harrison Sullivan's voice was low and husky. "You rushed here in this heavy rain. Do you want to worry me to death? I just didn't want Miss Aria to suffer waiting. And when you see her suffer, you suffer too." Chloe Winslet's voice held a sob. "I only want you to be happy." Harrison Sullivan seemed even more distressed, kissing her more deeply. Chloe Winslet couldn't suppress a soft moan. He chuckled low, his voice tender, feeling something. Chloe Winslet blushed, pushing him. "Go be with Miss Aria. I can manage myself." "Manage how?" Harrison Sullivan's voice held a teasing fondness for this sort of thing. "A man's help feels better." His hand slipped lower. Then came the rustle of fabric. Chloe Winslet suppressed gasps and Harrison Sullivan's low, coaxing voice. "Be good, relax." Standing outside the door, Aria Bennett felt her heart tearing apart. She remembered their first kiss, that year at 18, amidst a sky full of fireworks. He cupped her face and asked cautiously, "Aria, may I kiss you?" She nodded, blushing. He leaned in and kissed her, so gently it was as if he were holding the most fragile treasure. She remembered their first night. He was restrained and hesitant, repeatedly asking if it hurt. Only when she shook her head did he finally allow himself to possess her completely. Afterwards, he held her, comforting her for a long time, promising to be good to her for the rest of his life. But now, in a restroom, he was using his fingers to pleasure another woman. Harrison Sullivan, Harrison Sullivan, you have betrayed me utterly." Her heart felt as if it were being torn into, the pain so intense she could barely stand. She staggered back, accidentally bumping into a decorative vase by the wall. "Who's there?" Harrison Sullivan's sharp voice called out from inside. When Harrison Sullivan rushed out, the corridor was empty, save for an orange cat crouched in the corner, watching him warily. "Seems it was a cat," Chloe Winslet said, coming up behind him softly. "You should go back to Miss Aria. I'll take a taxi home later." Harrison Sullivan frowned. "In this heavy rain? What taxi? Stay by my side." Chloe Winslet bit her lip, lowering her voice. "But Miss Aria, who is your man?" Harrison Sullivan suddenly pinched her chin, his voice low. Chloe Winslet's cheeks instantly flushed red as she whispered, "You? Then listen to me." He took her hand and led her directly back into the concert hall. When they entered, Aria Bennett was still sitting in her original seat, listening quietly to the performance. Harrison Sullivan breathed a sigh of relief, pulling Chloe Winslet to sit beside him, casually explaining, "Darling, the rain is too heavy outside, and she happens to enjoy the performance too. So I let her stay." Aria Bennett gave a non-committal not exposing him. Throughout the entire performance, Harrison Sullivan remained attentive to Aria Bennett, asking if she was cold, massaging her stomach, even whispering if she wanted to leave early to rest. But Aria Bennett knew his left hand remained firmly intertwined with Chloe Winslet's. She suddenly remembered their first time holding hands. She was 16 that year, on a snowy winter night. He sneaked over, climbing the wall to her backyard, stretching his freezing red hands towards her, smiling as he said, "Aria, my hands are so cold. Will you warm them for me?" Blushing, she took his hands. He immediately tightened his grip and never let go. Back then, his eyes held only her. But now, he held one hand while holding another's. A single tear escaped uncontrollably. Harrison Sullivan noticed immediately, his thumb gently brushing her cheek. "What's wrong?" Aria Bennett smiled lightly and whispered, "The music is just so moving." Harrison Sullivan chuckled softly, his voice doting, "Such a baby, so sentimental." She didn't speak, letting him wipe away her tear. After the performance ended, the crowd gradually dispersed. But Harrison Sullivan didn't let Aria Bennett leave. He had a collection of musical instruments: wheeled out piano, cello, violin, each one priceless. "You said you liked these instruments before, so I bought them at a high price," he said, smiling at her. "Do you like them?" A staff member nearby promptly added, "Miss Aria, Mr. Sullivan went through a lot of trouble for these instruments. Some were acquired through high-stakes auctions from private collectors. Others were on loan from museums." Chloe Winslet stepped to the side, a dark glint flashing in her eyes. Aria Bennett gave a slight, ironic smile, and was about to speak when, "What's this?" Chloe Winslet suddenly reached out, curiously tugging at a nearby decorative rope. "Don't pull that," a staff member shouted, panicked. But it was too late. A mechanical rumble sounded overhead. The next second, heavy lighting rigs and sound equipment came crashing down in a split second. Harrison Sullivan yanked Chloe Winslet, shielding her in his arms as they rolled aside. And Aria Bennett stood rooted, watching the dark mass descend upon her. At that, excruciating pain shot through her. She collapsed into a pool of blood. Her last conscious thought was of Harrison Sullivan's panicked cry, "Aria." But she knew the person in his arms was someone else. Aria Bennett had a long dream. In the dream, 14-year-old Harrison Sullivan still wore his school uniform, the corner of his mouth bruised. Yet he smiled defiantly. She applied medicine to his wounds, her eyes red as she scolded him. Are you insane? Fighting 30 of them alone? Even Ultraman wouldn't fight like that. He raised an eyebrow nonchalantly. Who told those thugs to steal your money? No one gets to bully you. The young boy lifted his face, his gaze blazing and resolute. As long as I'm here, you won't suffer a single injury. In the dream, Arya Bennett wept bitterly, unable to stop calling his name, Harrison Sullivan, but he seemed not to hear. Holding the hand of her 14-year-old self, turning and walking away, the scene abruptly flipped. The real Harrison Sullivan shielded Chloe Winslet, letting her be struck and injured, blood staining her vision. She jolted awake, tears soaking her pillow. Before she could gather her thoughts, the next second, she saw Chloe Winslet in the hospital room, crying, and throwing herself into Harrison Sullivan's arms. What should we do? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have pulled that rope. If I hadn't, Miss Arya wouldn't be hurt. Punish me. Harrison Sullivan helplessly wiped her tears. You really want to be punished? Chloe Winslet sniffled and nodded. Yes, if I did wrong, I should be punished. Otherwise I won't be able to sleep. Harrison Sullivan chuckled low, pinching her cheek. Then call me husband. Chloe Winslet froze. What? Call me, she blushed, calling out softly. Husband. Harrison Sullivan ruffled her hair, his voice tender. Since you call me husband, you must listen to me. I have my own way of handling this matter. You don't need to worry about it. Chloe Winslet could only leave obediently. Arya Bennett watched this scene quietly, her fingers unconsciously knocking over the water cup on the bedside table. Crash! Harrison Sullivan turned sharply, finally noticing she was awake. He hurried over, his eyes full of concern. Arya? How are you? Does it hurt anywhere? He held her hand, his tone remorseful. I'm sorry, it was so chaotic. I mistook who was who. Arya Bennett closed her eyes, not exposing his lie. She only asked softly, what about Chloe Winslet? Harrison Sullivan's expression changed slightly, thinking she wanted to confront Chloe. He quickly explained she didn't mean to either, but it was indeed her fault. I've already punished her severely. Arya Bennett recalled the scene just now, where he made Chloe call him husband and thought, was that the punishment? How severe indeed. She said nothing. She didn't angrily demand why he mistook her, nor did she hysterically accuse him of favoritism. She just said calmly, I'm hungry. Harrison Sullivan was taken aback. He stared into her eyes, finally sensing something wrong. She was to calm like stagnant water. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but Arya Bennett repeated, I'm hungry, completely derailing his thoughts. He could only suppress his unease and nod gently, all right. Darling, I'll go buy you some food right away. Wait for me. He grabbed his car keys and hurried off. The moment the door closed, Arya Bennett's tears could no longer be held back, flowing uncontrollably. But she immediately wiped them dry. She looked out the window. The sunlight was harsh, yet it couldn't warm her heart. Love leads to hysterics, hatred leads to unwilling uproar. But now, towards Harrison Sullivan, she felt neither love nor hate. Harrison Sullivan put aside all his work and stayed by Arya Bennett's side in the hospital, never leaving her for a moment. He personally fed her, applied her medicine, and even woke up in the middle of the night to check if she had kicked off the covers. But Arya Bennett remained calm throughout, until the day of her discharge. Harrison Sullivan, thinking she must be feeling stifled, specially held a grand banquet to celebrate her recovery. The banquet hall was opulent, champagne towers stacked high, guests elegantly dressed, their chatter and clinking glasses filled with envy. Mr. Sullivan truly dotes on Miss Arya to the core. I heard all these gifts are limited editions, some even won by lighting the sky lantern auctions. Miss Arya is so fortunate. Arya Bennett stood at the center of the crowd, not a trace of a smile on her face. Harrison Sullivan finally couldn't bear it, pulling her to a corner, asking in a low voice, Are you still angry? His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist, his tone pleading, I swear. I truly mistook who it was. What can I do for you to forgive me, darling? Tell me. I'll do anything, all right? Arya Bennett looked at him and suddenly smiled. Fine. Fire Chloe Winslet. Harrison Sullivan's expression changed slightly, his tone softening. Her family circumstances are difficult. Her parents are ill. Why be so harsh? Arya Bennett watched him quietly. Just moments ago, he said he would do anything. But the moment it involved Chloe Winslet, he immediately went back on his word. She was about to speak when Harrison Sullivan's phone suddenly rang. That it was Chloe Winslet. On the other end, she cried hysterically, Mr. Sullivan, save me. Someone sent a group of thugs. They want to violate me. Harrison Sullivan's face drastically changed. What did you say? Where are you now? But the call had already disconnected. Harrison Sullivan's expression shifted from anxious to suspicious, then to suppressed anger. Arya, where is Chloe Winslet? His voice was tight, barely restrained. Arya Bennett's heart constricted violently. He didn't trust her. He didn't even need to verify. He had already decided it was her doing. Her voice trembled. You suspect me? Not suspect. He rubbed his temples. It's just, she said on the phone someone was going to harm her. So what? Arya Bennett's voice trembled. You think I did it? Harrison Sullivan fell silent for a moment, his voice low. I didn't say that. It's just the situation is urgent. One call from her. And you're this nervous? Arya Bennett suddenly laughed, but her eyes were icy. Harrison Sullivan, what exactly is your relationship with her? His frown deepened. This is a matter of life and death. Must you be jealous now? Jealous? Arya Bennett's voice was as light as a falling feather. You think this is jealousy? Harrison Sullivan took a deep breath, trying to soften his tone. Arya, there's really nothing between us. But she might be in danger now. Just tell me, was it you? It wasn't me. Arya Bennett interrupted him, each word feeling like a knife cutting her. I'll say it one last time. I don't know where she is, and I didn't send anyone after her. Harrison Sullivan stared at her, the anxiety in his eyes growing more evident. Time ticked by. Chloe Winslet's phone remained unreachable. Finally, he completely lost patience, grabbing Arya Bennett's wrist with enough force to crush her bones. Arya, I told you I've already punished her. Why are you still doing this? Ruining a girl's innocence is the most despicable tactic. I don't have time for your games. Tell me. Where is Chloe Winslet? Arya Bennett winced in pain, her face pale. But she stubbornly repeated, I don't know. Ask me 100 times. I still don't know. Harrison Sullivan was completely furious. Arya Bennett, I feel like I've never known you at all. He shoved her away violently. Thud. Arya Bennett staggered back several steps, her lower back slamming hard against the corner of a table, her forehead hitting a sharp decorative edge. Blood instantly gushed out. People around screamed, Mr. Sullivan, Miss Arya is hurt. But Harrison Sullivan paid no heed. He walked out without looking back, issuing sharp orders into his phone. Get the surveillance footage now. Find Chloe's last known location. Arya Bennett, leaning against the table, slowly stood up. Blood trickled down her temple, warm and sticky. Yet she felt no pain, compared to the agony of her heart being torn apart. What was this injury? She stared blankly in the direction Harrison Sullivan had left and suddenly laughed. Why would he care about her? His heart and eyes were now completely filled with Chloe Winslet, just as they once were completely filled with her. People panicked, crowding around, wanting to take her to the hospital, but she gently shook her head, pushing away all helping hands, and walked out of the banquet hall alone. Boom, just after she stepped out, a tremendous crash sounded behind her. Arya Bennett turned and saw the gilded plaque inscribed with Harrison Sullivan loves Arya Bennett. For a lifetime shatter into two pieces as it hit the ground. She looked at the plaque and suddenly laughed out loud. Laughing and laughing, tears fell. Harrison Sullivan, your lifetime was so short after all. Arya Bennett returned home alone. She silently treated the wound on her forehead and began packing. The necklace, ring, watch he gave her, the cards he wrote by hand, the photo albums they took together, everything related to him was packed into cardboard boxes. Trip after trip, thrown into the rubbish bin downstairs. After discarding the last box, the night wind carrying scattered snowflakes brushed her cheek. Standing under the streetlight, she suddenly found it ridiculous. The memories once treasured like gems were now just waste in the rubbish heap. The moment she turned, a sack was thrown over her head. Before she could struggle, a sharp pain struck the back of her neck. Darkness swallowed her, and she lost consciousness completely. When she woke, Arya Bennett found herself still in the sack, hands tied behind her back, mouth gagged with a cloth. Through the gaps in the sack, she saw Harrison Sullivan holding Chloe Winslet, sitting on a high-back sofa, surrounded by bodyguards. A bodyguard reported respectfully, Mr. Sullivan, we've caught him. This is a thug leader Miss Arya sent to harass Miss Winslet. Chloe Winslet shrank in Harrison Sullivan's arms, her voice timid. Harrison, maybe let it go. You came in time. I wasn't really harmed. Harrison Sullivan sneered coldly. No. His slender fingers gently stroked Chloe Winslet's cheek, his tone tender beyond belief. I can't bear to touch Arya. But since she dared to bully you, I must give you an explanation. Since this is the person she found, I'll make an example of him, so she won't dare do such things again. Arya Bennett felt her whole body turn cold. She finally understood this was all orchestrated by Chloe Winslet. After pretending to be assaulted, Chloe Winslet had someone kidnap her, tricking Harrison Sullivan into thinking she was a thug leader, all to make Harrison Sullivan torture her unknowingly. She struggled desperately, wanting to call Harrison Sullivan's name, but her gagged mouth could only emit faint whimpers. Chloe Winslet relented with a sigh. Then, go easy on him after all. He's Miss Arya's person. Harrison Sullivan's eyes turned colder. Go easy, impossible. Anyone who dares bully you will learn what it means to wish they were dead. The next second, Arya Bennett was dragged onto a high platform. Below was a swimming pool over 10 meters deep, its cold surface reflecting the stark white lights. Sacked and bound, she was pushed off the edge of the platform. Splash. Icy water instantly flooded the sack. The immense impact felt like a sledgehammer to her organs. Water rushed violently into her nose and mouth, choking her, her vision darkening, lungs stinging as if pierced by countless needles, forcing her to curl up instinctively. Help! Help! P. Her faint cries for help were drowned by the water. The sack, saturated with water, grew heavier, dragging her down like a lead weight. She struggled frantically, but the ropes only tightened, nearly suffocating her. Just as her consciousness was about to fade, the rope suddenly tightened, yanking her brutally out of the water. Cough, cough, cough. She coughed violently, water mixed with blood spraying from her lungs. Before she could catch her breath, she was pushed down again, once, twice, 3 times. Each descent felt like being thrown into an ice cellar. Each pull-up felt like being flayed. Over and over, a fate worse than death. Aria Bennett's consciousness grew increasingly blurred, only a buzzing roar in her ears, her lungs burning fiercely as if about to explode. On what felt like the umpteenth time she was pulled up, Chloe Winslet finally couldn't bear it and called out, "Enough, Harrison. Stop torturing him." But Harrison Sullivan sneered coldly, "It's not over yet." He took an iron rod from a bodyguard and walked over to Aria Bennett. "Dare to touch my person and you'll pay the price." Thud. The first blow landed heavily on her back. Aria Bennett's whole body arched violently like a shrimp electrocuted. Excruciating pain exploded from her spine, instantly spreading to her limbs. She bit down hard on the gag, but a muffled groan still escaped. Thud, 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 blow after blow. Without mercy, each strike felt like it was shattering her bones, rupturing her organs. Aria Bennett could feel warm liquid seeping from the corner of her mouth, dripping down her chin onto the floor. 99 blows. He hit it with his own hands. By the end, Aria Bennett could no longer feel the pain. Her consciousness began to fade, her vision blacking out intermittently. Her body felt as if it had been torn to shreds, thrown into a meat grinder. After the final blow, she lay limp on the ground like a rag doll, the pool of blood beneath her expanding, soaking her clothes, staining the floor. As Quenchy raised his polished leather shoe and brutally crushed the fingers exposed outside the sack. The sound of the phalanx breaking was clearly audible. Aria Bennett convulsed in agony but couldn't even scream. Harrison Sullivan then withdrew his foot, in satisfaction, turned around and held Chloe Winslet in his arms. His slender fingers gently stroked her long hair. "Were you frightened? All right, it's over." He waved at the bodyguards as if disposing of rubbish. "Throw this person back." Then, he picked up Chloe Winslet and left without looking back, his shoes making sticky sounds in the blood. The cloth in Aria Bennett's mouth finally loosened, mustering her last bit of strength. She hoarsely cried out his name. Harrison. Her voice was as faint as a candle in the wind, yet it drained all her strength. His steps halted abruptly, but Chloe Winslet fainted at the right moment, leaning softly on his shoulder. "Harrison, my head hurts so much. My head hurts so much." Harrison Sullivan immediately looked away, no longer concerned about the previous illusion. Holding her anxiously, "I'll take you to the hospital right away." He strode away, never looking back. Watching his retreating figure, Aria Bennett suddenly laughed. Laughing and laughing, tears mingled with blood streamed down. If only he had looked back just once, he would have known that the person he had tortured half to death was the one he once held dear. But he didn't. His eyes were completely filled with Chloe Winslet. When Aria Bennett regained consciousness, she found herself dumped on the floor of the villa, soaked through, her bones aching as if ground to dust. With great difficulty, she crawled up. Every movement tore agonizingly at the wounds on her back. Her fingers were swollen beyond recognition, the broken bones a horrifying bluish purple. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Trembling, she pulled it out and saw 2 messages. The first was from Harrison Sullivan. "Darling, I was wrong before. I shouldn't have lost my temper with you. I just didn't want you to make a mistake. I've been taking care of Chloe Winslet in the hospital these days, so I won't be coming back. I'll come back to be with you once she gets better." Aria Bennett stared at the screen, suddenly laughing through her tears. How ridiculous. After torturing her half to death, he could still unabashedly call her darling. He hadn't even noticed she was missing. The second was a notification of successful identity deregistration. "Miss Aria, your submitted application for identity information deregistration and name change has been approved and is effective immediately." Aria Bennett clutched the phone, her knuckles white. She could finally leave. Struggling to her feet, she changed into clean clothes, then picked up the already packed suitcase. In this home, she took everything that belonged to her, except for 2 items. First, the necklace Harrison Sullivan gave her when she was 18. The pendant contained a hidden microcamera. When he gave it to her, he said, "Aria, I want to know what you're doing every moment." Back then, she found it sweet. Now, it felt ironic. He probably hadn't checked it in a long time, right? But if he did, he would see that it was he who pushed her off the high platform into the pool, time and again. That it was he who struck her 99 times with the iron rod. That it was he who crushed her finger bones. Second, the love letters he wrote when pursuing her. A thick stack, the yellow pages still bearing the handwriting of his youth. "Aria, saw you in a white dress today. My heart raced like it was going to stop. Aria, let's get married right after graduation. All right. I can't wait a single day. Aria, I'll love you for a lifetime. Only you." Aria Bennett gently traced the words, suddenly remembering when he was 18. His eyes red-rimmed, pressing her against the wall, saying, "Aria, I can't live without you." Those vows, that once made her heart flutter sleeplessly, now seemed absurd. Every word a farce. Aria Bennett placed the necklace and love letters on the coffee table, then turned and left without hesitation. Before leaving, she threw her phone into the bin, burying all her past along with it. From now on, The Aria Bennett who would shed tears for Harrison Sullivan no longer existed in this world. As the plane took off, Aria Bennett looked out the window at the shrinking city lights, vaguely seeing the 18-year-old Harrison Sullivan smiling at her from within the clouds. The next second, sharp pain exploded from her ribs. The illusion vanished. She bit her lip hard, the taste of blood filling her mouth. "Madam, do you need assistance?" The man in the adjacent seat put down his magazine. He had keenly noticed the cold sweat on her temple. Aria Bennett shook her head, burying her face deeper into the scarf. It still carried the musty smell of the basemented cheap buy from the airport. "Restroom, I'm fine," she said softly, "just a bit airsick, Julian." Prescott observed this young woman who radiated incongruity. She wore an obviously oversized beige trench coat. There was a mark on her left ring finger from long-term wear, but her right hand was grotesquely twisted. Most unsettling was that, even in the 26-degree cabin, she was trembling involuntarily. "I'm a doctor." Julian Prescott offered a tissue. "You look quite pale." As Aria Bennett took the tissue, he noticed the bruises on her inner wrist marks left by professional restraint. Julian Prescott realized this was no ordinary victim of domestic violence. "Thank you." Aria Bennett clutched the tissue but didn't use it. She couldn't leave any traces, especially not now. But once a plane landed, even if Harrison Sullivan turned the world upside down, he would never find her. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot up from her abdomen. Aria Bennett's vision darkened, feeling a warm liquid gush from her nose. She instinctively touched it. Her fingertips met sticky crimson. Julian Prescott swiftly unfastened his seatbelt. "Stewardess, medical emergency over. Here." In her blurry vision, Aria Bennett saw the man's slender fingers quickly unbutton her collar. How strange she actually remembered Harrison Sullivan's hands at that moment. How those same hands had unfastened Chloe Winslet's buttons last night. Aria Bennett felt herself lifted by countless hands, like a leaf tossed on a stormy sea. She remembered the feeling of being pushed into the pool, the stinging pain of icy water filling her lungs, the burning sensation of the sack's fibers scraping her cheeks. The most painful was Harrison Sullivan's words, "Dare to touch my person, and you'll pay the price." Each word felt like a blunt knife slowly dismembering her heart. Before losing consciousness, Aria Bennett heard her own hoarse laughter. How ironic, the ribs that Harrison Sullivan personally broke are now piercing her lung. He always said he would protect her from any harm. Yet in the end, he became the one who hurt her the most. The cabin lights swayed overhead. Julian Prescott's shirt was soaked with sweat. This stranger was slowly slipping away in his hands. Yet some inexplicable intuition prevented him from giving up. The stewardess whispered, "Doctor, do we need an emergency landing?" The unconscious Aria Bennett suddenly convulsed violently. Julian Prescott held her steady. Turning to the stewardess, "Contact the airport for an ambulance. The patient has multiple fractures and internal bleeding. Needs." Before he finished, his wrist was suddenly grabbed. Those glazed eyes miraculously focused for a moment. Julian Prescott saw them filled with a startling determination. "No. Hospital." Aria Bennett's every word brought bloody foam to her lips. "Please." Julian Prescott was taken aback, but found himself nodding inexplicably. "I have a convalescent home in the suburbs." She woke to the smell of disinfectant. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains onto the sheets. Aria Bennett stared blankly at the ceiling, momentarily unsure if this was reality or a dream, until a deep male voice came from beside her. "You're awake." She turned sharply, meeting a pair of calm eyes. The man held a medical file. Seeing her awake, he casually closed it, his tone even. "You had internal bleeding and lost consciousness on the plane. I performed emergency procedures. How do you feel now?" Aria Bennett instinctively touched her abdomen. The pain had lessened considerably, but a dull ache remained beneath the skin. She opened her mouth, her voice hoarse. "Thank you." The man nodded, handing her a glass of water. "I'm Julian Prescott, a doctor. This is my private convalescent home. It's safe." The cup was warm. Aria Bennett's fingertips unconsciously rubbed its edge. After a moment of silent contemplation, she whispered, "Lynn? My name is Lynn." Aria Bennett stayed at the convalescent home. Julian Prescott made his rounds daily, but beyond necessary medical inquiries, he never pried into her privacy, until one day during a dressing change, a nurse accidentally knocked over a tray. The sound of metal instruments hitting the floor made Aria Bennett flinch violently, reflexively curling into a protected ball. Julian Prescott's hand paused midair, watching her instinctively shield her ribs. His gaze swept over the fading bruises on her wrist. He suddenly spoke. "These injuries weren't caused by an accident." Aria Bennett's breath hit. Julian Prescott didn't press, merely calmly adjusted her collar, his voice faint. "If you don't wish to speak of it, you needn't answer. But if needed, lawyers and police are available here." Aria Bennett gripped the sheets tightly and shook her head. Julian Prescott said no more. As he turned to leave, Aria Bennett suddenly called out, "Thank you." He looked back to see a faint smile on her pale face. "But truly, it's not necessary." Life at the convalescent home was tranquil, almost surreal. Aria Bennett's body gradually recovered. She occasionally went to the garden for some sun. One afternoon, passing the conference room, she unintentionally overheard Julian Prescott arguing with someone. "The other side is firm on this price. We can't possibly concede." But the market data clearly shows their valuation is inflated by at least 30%. Aria Bennett's steps halted, as if guided by an unseen force. She pushed the door open. All eyes turned towards her. Julian Prescott frowned. Lynn? Aria Bennett pursed her lips, pointing at the financial statements on the projection screen. After a moment, she spoke. The cash flow forecast on page 3 is problematic. They've hidden some debt. Calculating it this way, the actual premium should be raised by 15%. The conference room fell silent. Julian Prescott stared at her for a few seconds, then suddenly pushed the documents towards her. Continue. The next day, Julian Prescott slid a contract in front of her. The merger case is resolved. If you're interested, you can join my company as a strategic consultant. Aria Bennett was taken aback, then suddenly smiled. Aren't you afraid I'm a corporate spy? Julian Prescott leaned against the desk, watching her, his tone even. I looked into your background, of course. I found nothing. But my intuition tells me you're trustworthy. In the hospital VIP room, the smell of disinfectant was masked by the scent of lilies from a nearby arrangement. Harrison Sullivan sat by the bed, holding a bowl of steaming chicken soup. The spoon made a light clinking sound against the bowl's edge. Chloe, have another bite. He brought the spoon to Chloe Winslet's lips, his voice dripping with tenderness. I simmered it for 4 hours, skimmed all the fat. A blush spread across Chloe Winslet's pale face as she took small sips from his hand, her eyelashes casting shadows under the light. Harrison, you being here with me will miss Aria. She won't mind. Harrison Sullivan cut her off, his tone certain, as if convincing himself. Aria is the most understanding. But as he set the bowl down, the porcelain spoon hit the glass coffee table with a sharp clink. The sound pierced his temple like a needle dot. It had been 3 days. 3 days without any news from Aria Bennett. He pulled out his phone. The lock screen lit up, showing Aria Bennett's serene sleeping face. 1703, darling. I'll be back late 20 to 47. Still angry? Next day 9:15. Aria, answer the phone. The last message was from this morning. A lone green bubble suspended at the top of the chat. I need to make a call. He stood up abruptly, his trouser leg knocking over a small stool. In the fire escape at the Carter's end, Harrison Sullivan pressed the dial button for the 3rd time. The automated female voice repeated the words inch. No one is answering temporarily in both Chinese and English, creating an eerie echo in the empty stairwell. He dialed his assistant next. Foster, go to the villa now, he said after a moment's thought. Not mentioning he wanted to confirm Aria Bennett's whereabouts, only saying he needed to check the villa's security system. About half an hour later, the assistant reported back. Mr. Sullivan, the villa's security system shows everything is normal. It's just what? The kitchen waste disposal unit hasn't been used in 3 days. The smart home records show the last use was the day you left. Harrison Sullivan's breath hitched. Aria Bennett was a neat freak. She would never leave food waste overnight. The fingerprint lock made its familiar beep, the entryway sensor light turning on accordingly. But the space before him was pitch black, no lights left on. Even now, after he'd opened the door, the villa remained deathly quiet. Aria? His voice echoed in the high-ceiling living room. No response. The faint scent of roses that usually lingered in the air had dissipated, replaced by a cold emptiness. Harrison Sullivan stood at the entrance to the villa's master bedroom, his heart inexplicably racing, a sense of panic rising within him. As he slowly pushed the door open, the sight before him made his eyes widen involuntarily. The wardrobe was wide open, her clothes completely gone. From the dressing table, her commonly used perfumes, jewelry boxes all vanished. The framed photo of them that used to sit on the bedside table was also missing, leaving behind a lone, empty frame. His heart sank heavily. He hurried to the study, yanked open the drawer. Passports, ID cards, bank cards, everything that proved her existence was gone. Only 2 items lay quietly on the coffee table, a necklace, and a stack of yellow love letters. Harrison Sullivan's hand trembled as he picked up the necklace. He had given it to Aria Bennett on her 18th birthday. All these years, she had never taken it off. And now, with Aria Bennett missing, the necklace was left here, abandoned and alone. Harrison Sullivan refused to believe the worst possibility. He took out his phone and dialed his assistant again. Find out Aria Bennett's whereabouts now. Use all our connections. I want her found, even if you have to dig 3 feet underground. The other end immediately acknowledged. For a moment, all he could hear was the sound of frantic typing. Harrison Sullivan had never felt time pass so slowly. Moments later, his assistant's hesitant voice came through. Mr. Sullivan, Miss Aria's identity information has been deregistered. Deregistered? Why would Aria Bennett suddenly choose to deregister her identity? What had happened during his absence? Harrison Sullivan's eyelashes trembled, his palm unconsciously tightening, turning deathly white. The pain in his palm reminded him, right? The necklace might hold clues to Aria Bennett's whereabouts. He turned abruptly and rushed to the study, accessing the surveillance footage. But the images that appeared on the monitor left Harrison Sullivan's mind blank on the screen. Chloe Winslet stood at the edge of the high platform, a cold smile playing on her lips. The person in the sack struggled, and as the fabric slipped, he saw that face clearly. Harrison Sullivan's breathing stopped, the pale complexion, disheveled hair, blood trickling from the corner of the mouth. It was Aria Bennett. She was looking in his direction, her lips trembling as if trying to say something, but in the next second he pushed her down. Asterisk splash asterisk the sound of water splashing echoed in the monitoring room. While Harrison Sullivan's ears were filled only with a sharp ringing, he clutched the necklace. His knuckles white, a metallic taste rising in his throat. Suddenly, as if realizing something, Harrison Sullivan dragged the progress bar. His finger stopped abruptly. Chloe Winslet's smile was so obvious, as if mocking Harrison Sullivan through the screen. He stared at this now unfamiliar face, his breathing growing ragged. Just then, his phone rang again. Mr. Sullivan, the hospital. His assistant's voice came through, but he cut him off sharply. Get the car ready. His voice was hoarse beyond recognition. I'm going there now. The tires screeched on the ground. The door to the ward was pushed open violently. Harrison Sullivan stood at the entrance, his face terrifyingly dark. Chloe Winslet's phone clattered to the floor. Harrison, you knew it was Aria Bennett. Harrison Sullivan's voice was dangerously low. Like a demon crawled up from hell. Chloe Winslet's face instantly turned pale, her fingers unconsciously clutching the sheets. I don't know what you're talking about. The person in the sack. He grabbed her wrist, his grip so tight it seemed he would crush her bones. You knew it was her all along, didn't you? Chloe Winslet's tears instantly streamed down. Harrison, you're hurting me. But Harrison Sullivan seemed not to hear, his bloodshot eyes fixed on her. Answer me. I just loved you too much, she sobbed, her voice broken. I was afraid she would take you away. I had no choice. Harrison Sullivan looked at Chloe Winslet with disgust, then released her as if touching something filthy. His gaze swept the room, finally landing on the fruit knife on the bedside table. The cold light reflected his twisted face and Chloe Winslet's suddenly terrified eyes. You can't, she scrambled back in panic, the IV stand crashing down. Inside Harrison Sullivan's office, the lights were cold and white. Spread before him were numerous documents, including long-standing evidence of how she had secretly sowed discord between him and Aria Bennett. Among them was a file from a private detective. Photos, recordings, transfer records, even testimonies from the supposed thugs. Miss Winslet hired us, said to put on a show, paid enough. She told us to pretend to assault her, but nothing was supposed to happen for real. She said as long as Mr. Sullivan believed it, there'd be an extra reward afterwards. Harrison Sullivan's knuckles turned white, his eyes turning with obscure emotions. From beginning to end, it was all Chloe Winslet's orchestration, and he had pushed the person he loved most into the abyss. When Chloe was escorted into the office by bodyguards, she still wore a coquettish smile. Harrison, why did you summon me so urgently? Before she finished, a stack of documents slammed into her face. Explain. Harrison Sullivan's voice was cold as ice. Paper scattered everywhere. Chloe glanced down at the photos and bank statements, her smile freezing instantly. I can explain. She crouched to pick them up, her hands trembling. Someone must be framing me. It must be Aria Bennett. She hates me. So, Aria Bennett? Harrison Sullivan stared at the person before him, his tone unexpectedly calm. He took a recorder from the drawer and pressed play. That bitch deserved it. Who told her not to? Know her place? Chloe Winslet's voice echoed through the office, sharp and venomous, her face turned deathly pale. Chloe Winslet forced a smile, pushed the documents aside, and slowly walked towards Harrison Sullivan. Harrison, you have to believe me. I really didn't do those things. Meeting Harrison Sullivan's cold gaze, her breathing grew increasingly ragged. You have to believe me. I love you so much. Love? Harrison Sullivan questioned, his tone laced with disbelief. He reached out and gripped Chloe Winslet's chin. You do such things and still claim to love me. Don't you find it disgusting? Then what makes you think you're any better? Chloe Winslet suddenly looked up, the vulnerability in her eyes replaced by twisted hatred. Harrison Sullivan, you sought me out. You treated me as a replacement. You made me believe you loved me. She broke free from his grasp, pointing a finger at him and sneering. You're blind, can't tell true feelings from false. Who are you pretending to be deep for now? Aria Bennett has long since discarded you. She'd rather abandon everything and flee far away than look at you again. Harrison Sullivan's pupils constricted violently, his chest feeling as if struck by a heavy hammer. Chloe Winslet's laughter grew more mocking. Do you know what she left behind? That necklace you gave her. You've seen the footage inside. Haven't you? Every single blow was struck by your own hand. The air was dead silent for a few seconds. Harrison Sullivan suddenly laughed. He slowly stood up, walked over to Chloe Winslet, and reached out to caress her face, a movement gentle as a lover's, but his eyes were terrifyingly cold. You're right, I was blind, he whispered softly. So now, it's time to correct that mistake. Before Chloe Winslet could react, the office door opened again. Two bodyguards walked straight towards her, binding her tightly with coarse hemp rope. Chloe Winslet's eyes widened in shock, nearly thrown off balance by the forceful shove. Harrison Sullivan, you can't do this to me. I can return the money. Harrison Sullivan took a step back, watching expressionlessly as her hands were cuffed. Return? You think I care about that money? He leaned close to her ear, his voice soft as a venomous snake's hiss. I want you to taste what it means to wish for death. Harrison Sullivan stood in the corridor of the mental institution, the cold fluorescent light stretching his shadow long. He still held the file detailing all of Chloe Winslet's crimes. Over the years, embezzlement, commercial fraud, intentional assault. Even how she meticulously plotted to frame Aria Bennett. The ward door opened. Chloe Winslet crouched in the corner, her face still bandaged from self-inflicted wounds. She looked up and saw Harrison Sullivan, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Harrison, are you here to save me?" She tried to crawl forward, but her weakened body couldn't support the movement. Chloe Winslet lay on the ground, covered in filth, her fingers still desperately clutching Harrison Sullivan's trouser leg. Harrison Sullivan didn't answer, merely crouching down before her, looking down at her. His eyes were cold as ice, his voice low and calm. "Chloe Winslet, do you know why I'm here?" Chloe Winslet trembled, shaking her head. I know I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong." "Wrong?" Harrison Sullivan sneered, throwing the file in front of her. "This is what you call knowing you were wrong?" Chloe Winslet glanced at the contents of the file, her face instantly turning ashen. She shook her head frantically. "No, I didn't do these things. Someone is framing me, Harrison. You have to believe me. You have to believe me." "Framed?" Harrison Sullivan leaned forward, gripping her chin with enough force to crush bone. "You think I'd still believe your lies?" He released her, took out a handkerchief to wipe his hands, his face full of disgust. The action deeply stung Chloe Winslet's eyes. Her pupils contracted sharply, and she lunged at Harrison Sullivan, only to be kicked away. She fell to the ground, screaming hysterically. "Harrison Sullivan, you can't do this to me. I loved you so much. Everything I did was for you. For me." Harrison Sullivan's eyes turned completely cold. "For your own selfish desires, you destroyed everything between Aria Bennett and me. Was that for me? Since that's the case, it's my turn to do something for you." He turned and nodded to the doctor at the door. "From today, her treatment plan will be personally designed by me." The doctor respectfully handed over a new medical record. Harrison Sullivan opened the first page. It read, "Patient 0487, treatment plan, electroconvulsive therapy, pharmaceutical control, lifetime incarceration." Chloe Winslet began to struggle wildly. "No, you can't do this to me. Harrison Sullivan, I curse you. I curse you to never gain Aria Bennett's forgiveness." Harrison Sullivan left the room without looking back, Chloe Winslet's heart-wrenching cries echoing behind him. He stood in the corridor, lit a cigarette. In the swirling smoke, his eyes were inscrutable. His assistant cautiously approached. "Mr. Sullivan, as you instructed. The Keough family's assets have been completely frozen. Chloe Winslet's parents' movements have also been restricted, ensuring they cannot find patient." Harrison Sullivan gave a non-committal leak her embezzlement scandal to the media. "I want her utterly disgraced." The assistant nodded and left. Harrison Sullivan stubbed out his cigarette, looking out at the night sky. He knew this retaliation was far from enough to atone for the harm done to Aria Bennett, but at least he would ensure Chloe Winslet could never hurt anyone again. Harrison Sullivan stood before the villa he once shared with Aria Bennett. The surveillance footage in his hand had been replayed countless times, but the records had been thoroughly deleted by Chloe Winslet. Not a single useful clue remained. "Keep looking." His voice was hoarse, his eyes bloodshot. "Even if you have to turn all of Jingbai upside down, find her." His assistant fearfully handed him a file. "Mr. Sullivan, Miss Aria's identity information has been deregistered. Her entry and exit records have been erased too." Harrison Sullivan clenched his fist, his knuckles white. He frantically used all his connections, even offering exorbitant rewards. But Aria Bennett had vanished without a trace, as if she had evaporated from the earth. He went to every place they had ever been together. Their high school, the amusement park, the mountain temple, even the city abroad where she studied. But each time, he came up empty. He began having frequent nightmares. In them, Aria Bennett stood in a pool of blood, staring coldly at him. "Harrison Sullivan, you pushed me into hell." He would wake up drenched in cold sweat, his heart aching as if gouged out. Harrison Sullivan expanded his search, even neglecting company affairs. He flew from country to country, hoping to catch a glimpse of that familiar figure. 3 months later, Harrison Sullivan stood outside a luxury boutique on Avenue Montaigne, gazing at the wedding dress in the window. Aria Bennett once said she preferred simple satin wedding dresses, no lace, no diamonds, just the purest white. He smiled self-deprecatingly. Those past days had dissipated like bubbles. Now, he didn't even know where Aria Bennett was. Suddenly, his peripheral vision caught a familiar silhouette. Black hair like a waterfall, a slender figure, a walking posture strikingly similar to the one in his dreams. His heart skipped a beat instinctively. He chased after her, Aria Bennett. The woman didn't turn back, continuing forward. He quickened his pace, reaching out to grab her wrist. But the next second, a black car pulled up beside her, the door opened, and a man in a suit took her bag, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh softly. Her profile was revealed a completely unfamiliar face. Harrison Sullivan froze in place. It wasn't her, just a similar back view. He dropped his hand in despair. His throat tight. His phone rang. His assistant's cautious voice came through. "Mr. Sullivan, the banquet is about to start. You." Harrison Sullivan closed his eyes, hung up and turned to leave. And the moment he turned, from a street corner cafe, Aria Bennett slowly put down her cup, her gaze calmly sweeping over his retreating figure. Julian Prescott followed her line of sight. "Is it him?" Aria Bennett retracted her gaze and nodded slightly. She stood up, linking her arm with Julian Prescott's. "Let's go." It's time for the banquet. Aria Bennett stood before a full-length mirror. She tilted her head slightly, adjusting the diamond earring on her earlobe, a faint smile curling the corner of her lips. Harrison Sullivan will also be at this private banquet tonight. Julian Prescott's voice came from behind as he handed her a glass of champagne. You've been paying attention to him all along. Did you come here because of him? Aria Bennett took the glass, her fingertip lightly tapping the rim, producing a clear sound. You overthink it. The banquet venue was dazzling, crystal chandeliers refracting brilliant light. Aria Bennett held her champagne, effortlessly conversing with several representatives from European consortiums. Her fluent French and sharp business insights made her the center of attention. When Harrison Sullivan entered the venue, his gaze was unconsciously drawn to that back view. Her every gesture carried a familiar sharpness. He frowned slightly, about to approach, but the other party just in time turned and brushed past him. In that instant, he caught a faint scent of roses. Harrison Sullivan turned sharply, but the figure had already disappeared into the crowd. Who was that lady just now? He stopped a waiter, his voice tense. The waiter smiled. That is Madame Lin, the founder of the emerging investment firm N&Y. Harrison Sullivan's pupils constricted violently. N&Y? He murmured. Those were clearly Aria Bennett's initials. He couldn't believe it. Yet he couldn't help but hope that Aria Bennett had returned. This was the third time Julian Prescott noticed Aria Bennett's unusual interest in Sullivan Group. He stood at the study door, watching her slender back stiff under the desk lamp, her pen scratching sharply on paper. It didn't look like she was analyzing data, more like dissecting an enemy. Looking at Sullivan Group's reports again, Julian Prescott entered with a glass of warm milk, deliberately making his footsteps audible. Aria Bennett's fingers twitched imperceptibly, quickly closing the folder. Just routine analysis. She took the milk, a perfect smile curling her lips, getting to know future competitors in advance. Julian Prescott didn't expose her lie. Over the past 3 months, the frequency with which she studied Sullivan Group far exceeded that of any other company. Sometimes she would stay up until dawn, but whenever he tried to ask, she would swiftly change the subject, especially after that one-sided encounter in Paris. Don't stay up too late, he finally said, placing the glass down. We have an early meeting tomorrow. Aria Bennett nodded, but her gaze had already drifted back to that stack of documents. When Julian Prescott closed the study door, he heard the sound of the pen scratching paper again, like the embodiment of some obsession. At 3:17 a.m., a sharp scream pierced the villa's silence. Julian Prescott jolted awake, his doctor's instinct snapping him to alertness. The sound came from Aria Bennett's bedroom. He rushed over, without even putting on his slippers, pushing the door open. The sight made his heart clench violently. Aria Bennett was curled up in the corner between the headboard and the wall, her hands clutching her throat, her face deathly pale. Her pajamas were soaked with cold sweat, clinging to her thin back. Her whole body shook like a leaf in the wind. What startled Julian Prescott most were her eyes, pupils dilated, gaze unfocused, as if seeing some terrifying scene not present. Lynn? Julian Prescott knelt on one knee before her, not daring to touch her rashly. Look at me. Can you hear me? No response. Aria Bennett's breathing grew increasingly rapid, her lips beginning to turn blue. Acute PTSD episode. Julian Prescott quickly assessed. He gently grasped Aria Bennett's wrist, feeling icy, clammy sweat. Breathe with me, he said, placing her hand on his chest. Feel my breathing rhythm. Slowly, Julian Prescott deliberately slowed his breathing, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. He could feel a ring of uneven scars under his palm on her slender wrist. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Aria Bennett's breathing finally began to sync with his. Her pupils refocused, and upon recognizing the person before her, she snatched her hand back. I'm fine, she said hoarsely, reflexively pulling her pajama sleeve down to cover her wrist. Sorry, just a nightmare. Julian Prescott didn't puncture the clumsy lie. He got up to pour a glass of warm water, casually adding a few drops of soothing essential oil to the nearby diffuser. Drink some water first. He handed it to her, deliberately maintaining a safe distance. I'll get you a dry towel. When he returned from the bathroom, Aria Bennett had moved to the armchair by the window, holding the water cup with both hands, her gaze fixed on the night outside. The moonlight outlined her profile, her eyelashes casting small shadows under her eyes. Julian Prescott gently draped the towel over her shoulders and sat in the armchair opposite. Do you want to talk about the nightmare? He asked casually, as if discussing the next day's weather. Aria Bennett's fingers unconsciously rubbed the edge of the cup. After a long silence, she suddenly spoke. Do you know what it feels like to drown? Julian Prescott was slightly taken aback. First, water rushes into your nostrils, burning like fire. Aria Bennett's voice was soft, as if telling someone else's story. Then your lungs start convulsing. You want to breathe but only inhale more water. The most terrifying part is, she looked up. You can clearly feel life slipping away, powerless to stop it. Julian Prescott noticed the unnatural twist of the ring finger on her left hand, a deformity from a broken bone that hadn't been treated in time. I dreamed. Aria Bennett suddenly stood up, walked to the desk, and pulled a brown paper envelope from the bottom drawer. You should see this. Julian Prescott took the heavy envelope, outspilled a stack of photos, medical records, and a photocopy of a coffee-stained, ruined marriage certificate. So this is your original name? Julian Prescott's words died on his lips. As the content stunned him, Aria Bennett lay in a pool of blood, a gruesome wound on her forehead. The carpet beneath her stained dark red. The medical report listed 3 fractured ribs, comminuted fracture of the right index finger, pulmonary edema. This is Harrison Sullivan's masterpiece. Aria Bennett's voice was eerily calm. He was my former husband. She paused, then her gaze fell on the marriage certificate. No, we actually had no real relationship. She smiled self-deprecatingly. He thought the person in the sack was a thug harassing his wife, but it was me. Julian Prescott turned the page and saw surveillance screenshots. A tall man pushing a sacked figure off a high platform pole repeatedly. A young, pretty woman standing nearby, a smile on her lips. Chloe Winslet. Aria Bennett pointed at the woman, his legal wife, and I was just a joke, Julian. Prescott finally understood her obsession with Sullivan Group. This wasn't ordinary business competition, it was deeply personal vengeance. So you want to destroy him, it wasn't a question. Aria Bennett walked to the window, the moonlight stretching her shadow long. I want him to taste what it's like to have nothing. Her fingers lightly traced the window pane. To lose his company, his reputation, Her voice trailed off. Julian Prescott walked up behind her, not touching, just a quiet presence. He said softly, revenge won't bring true peace. Then what will? Aria Bennett turned sharply, a dark fire burning in her eyes. Forgiveness? Forgetting. She pulled open her pajama collar, revealing a ferocious scar below her collarbone. He did this with an iron rod, 99 strikes. He counted every single one. Julian Prescott looked at the scar, then suddenly pulled her into an embrace. Aria Bennett stiffened for a moment before collapsing against his chest as if all strength had left her. I'm not trying to stop you. Julian Prescott's chin rested on her head. I just don't want to see you consumed by hatred. He gently held her deformed finger. These injuries, they shouldn't define your life. Aria Bennett didn't answer, but Julian Prescott felt the fabric over his chest grow damp outside. The eastern sky began to lighten. Julian Prescott looked at the finally calm Aria Bennett in his arms and made a decision. Show me your plan, he said. All of it. Aria Bennett looked up, surprise in her red, swollen eyes. If this can help you truly let go and start anew, Julian Prescott wiped the tear stains from her face. I'll help you. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Aria Bennett was explaining her acquisition strategy for Sullivan Group to Julian Prescott, pointing at the ownership structure chart. Her voice was still hoarse, but her eyes had regained clarity. Sunlight fell on the scattered documents, illuminating the stained marriage certificate. Aria Bennett looked at it for a moment, then tossed it into the wastepaper basket. Aria Bennett stood before the floor-to-ceiling window on the top floor of N and Y Group, overlooking the entire city. Her reflection showed her holding a glass of red wine, the dark liquid swirling gently, reminiscent of the blood she lay in that day. Her assistant knocked and entered, respectfully handing her a file. President Lin, Sullivan Group stock has fallen another 5%. The market generally has a negative outlook on Harrison Sullivan's recent decisions. Aria Bennett took the file, a cold smile playing on her lips. Good. She flipped through Sullivan Group's recent financial report, her fingertip lightly tapping a line of numbers, to fill the financial gap left by Chloe Winslet's earlier embezzlement. Harrison Sullivan had already sold off many of his personal assets. Continue selling the Sullivan Group bonds we hold. She closed the file, her voice calm. The assistant hesitated. But if Sullivan Group collapses too quickly, we'll also incur losses on some investments. Aria Bennett looked up, a sharp glint in her eyes. It doesn't matter. I don't care. She only cared about how Harrison Sullivan would lose everything he once held dear, just as she had lost everything. Sullivan Group. Harrison Sullivan stared intently at the computer screen in his office, the stock curve plummeting. Shareholders' calls came one after another. He impatiently muted them. Find out who's behind this manipulation, he said coldly to his assistant. The assistant wiped sweat from his brow. We've already looked into it. The capital flow originates from a new, prominent investment firm in Switzerland. Its background is deep. We can't trace the actual controller yet. And Harrison Sullivan frowned, suddenly remembering something. The company name and why he repeated the name, as if figuring something out. His pupils trembling slightly. Aria Bennett. His pupils constricted violently. His fingers unconsciously tightened around the pen, ink bleeding onto the document. Was it her? Had she returned? Aria Bennett sat in a private room, facing Sullivan Group's former financial director, Victor Blackwood. Victor Blackwood rubbed his hands, his eyes shifting nervously. President Lin, the conditions you promised. Aria Bennett smiled lightly, sliding a check across the table. This is the deposit. You'll get the rest upon completion. Victor Blackwood greedily eyed the number on the check, nodding repeatedly. Don't worry, Harrison Sullivan is planning to mortgage core patents to stabilize the stock price recently. As long as I make a slight move. No. Aria Bennett interrupted him, her voice soft but firm. I want you to help him. Victor Blackwood was stunned. What? Help stabilize the stock price? Make him think the crisis is averted? She took a sip of red wine, a cold intent in her eyes. Then, when he's most relaxed, strike a fatal blow. The next day, Harrison Sullivan watched the suddenly stabilized stock price, his brow furrowed. We found out. Director Blackwood contacted several institutions for capital injection. The assistant reported. Victor Blackwood. Harrison Sullivan was silent for a moment, then sneered coldly. Where did he get the connections? The assistant shook his head, unclear. But the funds are indeed in place. Temporarily easing the pressure, Harrison Sullivan walked to the window. The city light sparkled. In the night, he felt something was off. Investigate, he turned, his face showing no relief from the stock price rebound. Find out which institutions Victor Blackwood contacted, quickly. Outside, the night was deep and heavy like the calm before a storm. Aria Bennett took the file Julian Prescott handed her, glanced at it and smiled lightly. Harrison Sullivan is indeed suspicious. Julian Prescott raised an eyebrow. Time to reel in the net. Wait a little longer. She closed the file, her gaze drifting to the night sky outside the window. I want him to come begging me. Himself. Just as she had once begged him to return. Harrison Sullivan's premonition proved correct. Just as Sullivan Group's stock price was stabilizing, the institutions seemed to have agreed, collectively withdrawing their funds. Sullivan Group's stock price plummeted, hitting a historic low. Harrison Sullivan stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, his hands slowly clenching. His assistant dared not even breathe heavily behind him. Where's Victor Blackwood? Uncontactable. Silence fell over the office. The assistant's sweat was unwipeable. He knew that revealing what he'd found might mean the end of his career. Did you find out who owns those institutions? It had come. The assistant closed his eyes, placing the documents on the desk. Mr. Sullivan, our investigation shows the capital injection institutions are backed by different companies, but those companies all belong to N and Y. Hearing this, Harrison Sullivan felt an unexpected sense of release. His intuition told him N and Y was Aria Bennett. Aria Bennett had come for revenge. In that case, Harrison Sullivan stood at the foot of N and Y's building, his suit slightly wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. He had been waiting here for 3 days. The receptionist politely and coldly rejected his every appointment request. Security vigilantly blocked his every attempt to enter, but he could wait no longer. Step aside. His voice was dangerously low, so before the security guard could react, Harrison Sullivan pushed him aside and strode towards the lift. Today, he had to see Aria Bennett. The top-floor office door was pushed open violently. Aria Bennett sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to him, a pen making sharp strokes on a document. Sullivan, she said without turning, her voice calm. Trespassing is an offense. I could call the police. Harrison Sullivan's breath hitched. That voice, the voice he heard countless times in his dreams, was now within reach, yet cold as a stranger's. Aria? He rasped, stepping forward. I know it's you. Aria Bennett finally turned, sunlight streamed from behind her, outlining her slender figure. She wore exquisite makeup. The shadow of the girl who would cry for him seemed to have vanished. Lynn? She corrected him, lightly tapping the nameplate on her desk. Or, you may address me as President Lynn. Harrison Sullivan's chest heaved. I've uncovered everything about Chloe Winslet. He stepped forward, planting his hands on her desk. It was her. She orchestrated those acts. She deceived me all along. I truly thought the thug was someone you sent to harm her. Aria Bennett watched him quietly. Not a ripple in her eyes. Harrison Sullivan's voice grew softer. If I had known it was you. How could I possibly? Possibly what? Aria Bennett suddenly smiled. Possibly you pushed me off the high platform? Possibly beat my ribs with an iron rod? Or possibly crush my fingers? She picked up a remote and pressed it lightly. The projection screen in the office slowly descended. The footage showed the sack slipping away, revealing Aria Bennett's pale, bloody face. Harrison Sullivan watched coldly, Chloe Winslet standing behind him, a triumphant smile on her lips. Then the iron rod falling, Aria Bennett's scrolled-up body, and faint sounds of pain. Harrison Sullivan's face turned deathly pale. Shall I continue? Aria Bennett propped her chin, her tone light. I have plenty more. Like the part where you held Chloe Winslet and made her call you husband. Harrison Sullivan was speechless, looking at her cold eyes. The next second, his knees hit the ground heavily. I'm sorry, his voice trembled, fingers clutching the edge of her desk. I truly didn't know. Aria Bennett looked down at him, suddenly finding it ridiculous. The once who aloof and arrogant. Harrison Sullivan now knelt before her like a stray dog. Harrison Sullivan closed his eyes tightly after a long silence. Harrison Sullivan looked up. Aria, what will it take for you to forgive me? Aria Bennett took a document from a drawer and pushed it towards him. Sullivan Group Equity. Acquisition agreement, sign it, she said flatly. All the shares you hold, I'll buy them at market price. Harrison Sullivan was stunned. You want Sullivan Group? No. Aria Bennett stood, her heels making crisp sounds on the marble floor. She leaned forward, her fingertip lightly tapping the contract. I want you to hand Sullivan Group over to me personally. She didn't hide her true intention. And watch how I destroy it, piece by piece. Harrison Sullivan's trembling fingers touched the contract. He knew what this meant. Signing it meant the Sullivan family's legacy would change hands completely. Not signing, he would lose any chance to win her back forever. Aria Bennett watched him struggle and suddenly felt weary. I'll give you 3 days to consider. She turned towards the floor-to-ceiling window, her back cold and distant. But Harrison Sullivan, don't forget, You're in no position to negotiate terms with me now. Sullivan Group's top-floor boardroom dot beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city's lights sparkled. Aria Bennett sat at the head of the table, her fingertips lightly tapping the surface. Before her were asset divestiture agreements waiting to be signed. On either side of the table, executives who once bowed to Harrison Sullivan now kept their heads down, breathing lightly, afraid to disturb her thoughts. Sullivan New Energy Division merged the medical sector into the Prescott Group. Her voice was calm, as if discussing the weather. As for the remaining shall it keep it? The financial director cautiously asked. President Lin, what about the Sullivan Group brand? Aria Bennett looked up, a cold smile curling her lips. Sullivan Group. She slowly stood, her heels clicking clearly on the marble floor like a warning bell in everyone's hearts. From today, there is no Sullivan Group. She raised her hand, pushing the final document towards the man sitting silently at the end of the table. The document slid to Harrison Sullivan. The cover read * notice of position adjustment * he retained the title of CEO, but all decision-making power was stripped. He was required to submit daily work reports to Aria Bennett. Harrison Sullivan stared at the document, his fingers trembling slightly. But he didn't reach for it. Aria Bennett looked at him and suddenly smiled. What, Mr. Sullivan isn't satisfied? The boardroom was dead silent. Harrison Sullivan slowly looked up. His once sharp, eagle-like eyes were now dull, as if all life had been drained. After a few seconds of silence, he finally picked up a pen and signed his name on the document. Mr. Sullivan, your daily report. The secretary placed a document on Harrison Sullivan's desk, her tone respectful but her eyes filled with pity. Harrison Sullivan numbly opened it. * Sullivan Group Maintenance Progress Report * it detailed. Daily cleaning frequency of the company. Sign, watering status of office plants. Number of visitors received at reception 0. He closed his eyes and signed. This was Aria Bennett's demand. He had to sign personally, confirming he was managing the shell company diligently every day. At an open-air cafe, Aria Bennett carefully cut her steak, the knife scraping lightly against the plate. You still cut steak so fiercely. Julian Prescott chuckled, taking her plate and naturally cutting it into small pieces. Like you're dissecting an enemy. Aria Bennett raised an eyebrow. Maybe I am. Julian Prescott pushed the plate back, his fingertip lightly brushing her hand. How does revenge taste? Aria Bennett looked towards the lake. Sunlight shattered into countless gold flakes on the water surface. More empty than I imagined. She whispered. Julian Prescott watched her profile and suddenly said, There's an astronomy exhibition tonight. Fancy going, astronomy exhibition, yes. The corner of his lips lifted. You said you loved stargazing as a child. Aria Bennett was taken aback. She had indeed said that. Long ago, on a drunken night, she hadn't expected him to remember. Under the planetarium's starry dome, Aria Bennett looked up at the simulated Milky Way slowly swirling. Julian Prescott stood behind her, his arm loosely around her shoulders, preventing her from being jostled by the crowded visitors. That's Altair Aquila, he explained. Softly near her, in Chinese legend, it can only meet Vega once a year. Aria Bennett smiled lightly. Isn't that a tragedy? But at least they reunite every year. Julian Prescott's voice was soft. Isn't that so? Aria Bennett turned to look at him, suddenly noticing his exceptionally long eyelashes under the blue light, like dusted starlight. Unconsciously, the distance between them shortened. Drawing closer, Aria Bennett, a hoarse roar came from behind. Aria Bennett turned to see Harrison Sullivan standing at the foot of the steps, face pale, eyes bloodshot. He stared at Julian Prescott's arm around her shoulder, his chest heaving violently. Who is he? The planetarium corridor lights were cold and white. Aria Bennett leaned against the wall, casually adjusting her cuff. Mr. Sullivan, need I remind you? Your current behavior constitutes stalking and harassment. Harrison Sullivan's fists clenched audibly. I asked who he is. Julian Prescott, she smiled. Slightly, my partner, boyfriend, or perhaps future husband, define it as you will. Husband! The word stabbed into Harrison Sullivan's heart like a knife. He grabbed her wrist violently. We're not divorced yet. Aria Bennett looked at his hand and suddenly laughed. Divorce? Harrison Sullivan, have you forgotten? Our marriage certificate was fake. She slowly withdrew her hand, pulling up a document on her phone and showing it to him. Certificate of Invalid Marriage Registration. Need I remind you? She leaned close to his ear, her voice soft as a venomous snake's hiss. Your legal wife is currently in prison. Harrison Sullivan staggered back a step. As if all strength had left him, Julian Prescott stepped out from the shadows, one hand in his pocket, the other naturally resting on Aria Bennett's waist. Mr. Sullivan, his tone was even. If you continue harassing my girlfriend, I will consider a restraining order. Harrison Sullivan stared at the hand on Aria Bennett's waist, suddenly remembering years ago. He, too, had declared sovereignty under the school's cherry blossom tree before everyone. Aria Bennett is mine, no one else can touch her. Now the roles were reversed. He was the one being warned, finally tasting what it felt like to have his heart torn apart. In the car on the way back, Aria Bennett looked out at the speeding cityscape and suddenly spoke. Was I too cruel just now? Julian Prescott held the steering wheel with one hand, the other covering hers. Compared to what he did to you, this isn't even interest. Aria Bennett looked down at their intertwined hands, suddenly realizing, Unknowingly, revenge was no longer the only reason keeping her alive. The sunroof slowly opened, revealing a sky full of stars. Julian Prescott's voice came mixed with the night breeze. "Look, Vega." Arya Bennett looked up, feeling for the first time that the stars could also not make one feel lonely. Not far behind them, Harrison Sullivan stood in the shadows, staring at the spot where Arya Bennett and Julian Prescott were. "Arya Bennett, you're angry with me, aren't you? You must still care about me. That's why you found this person, to make me yield, right?" His eyes were dark, as if having made some resolve. Heavy rain poured down, the cement ground in front of Sullivan Group's building gleaming under the downpour. Harrison Sullivan knelt in the rain, his suit soaked through, black hair plastered to his forehead. His knees sank deep into the puddles, but he stubbornly looked up, his gaze fixed on the lit window on the top floor. He knew Arya Bennett was there. "Arya Bennett," his voice was hoarse, almost drowned by the thunder. "I beg you, see me one more time." The building's revolving door slowly opened, several security guards emerged with black umbrellas. The leader sighed. "Mr. Sullivan," President Lynn said, "if you continue like this, we'll have to take coercive measures." Harrison Sullivan gave a wry smile, rainwater dripping from his jaw. "Then let her come out and chase me away herself." The guards exchanged glances, reluctantly speaking into their walkie-talkies for instructions. After a moment, a few guards, looking hesitant, but after exchanging glances, carried out a bucket. The next second, a bucket of ice-cold water, mixed with ice cubes, was dumped mercilessly over Harrison Sullivan's head. The bone-chilling cold instantly penetrated his bones. His lips lost all color, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. From the top-floor window, Arya Bennett coldly watched the scene, lightly tapping her Bluetooth earpiece. "Harrison Sullivan, you think the ruse of inflicting an injury on oneself to win trust or sympathy will work on me?" Her voice, transmitted through the guards' walkie-talkies, was clear and cruel. "When you broke my bones back then, I didn't get the chance to kneel and beg you." The next morning, when Harrison Sullivan woke in his hotel suite, he found all his credit cards frozen. His phone vibrated incessantly, screen filled with missed calls from his bank manager. He called back. The manager's tone was grave. "Mr. Sullivan, your personal accounts have been locked by the cross-border settlement system, including your overseas trust funds." Harrison Sullivan's fingers gripping the phone turned white. Arya Bennett was pushing him to the brink. Without Sullivan Group assets frozen, he couldn't even afford the hotel room now. He suddenly laughed low, the sound hoarse like sandpaper. "Arya, you really leave me no way out." And Arya Bennett's retaliation didn't stop there. At the company's all-hands meeting, Arya Bennett sat at the head, lightly tapping the table. "Today, there's a special segment." She spoke slowly, smiling towards the audience. "Let's welcome Mr. Sullivan to read a business model text for everyone." Harrison Sullivan stood in the corner, face pale. He clutched a stack of yellow papers, the love letters he wrote to Arya Bennett at 18, each page soaked with the most sincere vows of youth. "Read." Arya Bennett urged softly. "Let everyone learn from Mr. Sullivan's literary skills." The entire venue was silent. Harrison Sullivan's fingertips trembled slightly, but he still opened the first page. "Arya, saw you in a white dress today." My heart raced like it was going to stop. His voice was dried out by the third page. His Adam's apple bobbed violently. "When I'm 22. Let's get married, all right? I'll love you for a lifetime. Only you." His voice was hoarse beyond recognition. Yet he read every word of all 20 pages. When he finished the last sentence, the venue was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Several female employees had quietly reddened eyes. Arya Bennett, however, wore a smile throughout, even applauding at the end. "Brilliant performance," she commented. "Pity, it's all lies." Harrison Sullivan looked up sharply, something in his eyes completely shattered. This incident sparked massive discussion within the company. Julian Prescott pushed the door open and slammed a stack of files onto the desktop, paper scattered, revealing the top medical report. Harrison Sullivan, severe depression, accompanied by gastric bleeding symptoms. "Look at this." Julian Prescott's voice was cold as ice. "If this continues, he'll die." Arya Bennett glanced down, her fingertips curling unconsciously, but she quickly regained composure. She took a sip of coffee, her tone indifferent. "So?" Julian Prescott stared at her and suddenly laughed, the smile not reaching his eyes. "So? Arya Bennett, when did you become like this?" He stepped closer, his long fingers tapping the medical report with a dull sound. "Making him lose everything isn't enough? Making him report to you like a dog every day isn't enough? Now you won't be satisfied until you see him in the ICU?" Arya Bennett's eyelashes fluttered. The coffee cup grew warm in her palm. "I didn't force him." She looked up, her eyes icy. "He deserved this." "Really?" Julian Prescott suddenly leaned down, hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. "Then why won't you look at me?" Arya Bennett's breath hitched. Julian Prescott's voice lowered, carrying an indescribable meaning. "Arya, have you never truly let him go?" The office fell into dead silence. Raindrops beat against the window outside like a countdown. Arya Bennett put down the coffee cup. The base made a light sound against the desk. "I have." She finally spoke, her voice soft, yet seeming to use all her strength to utter those 3 words. Julian Prescott didn't move, still maintaining that oppressive posture, his gaze scraping her face like a knife. "Then why can't you admit you've gone too far?" Aria Bennett stood up abruptly, almost nose to nose with him. Julian Prescott. You know what I've been through. You know I know. Julian Prescott interrupted her, his voice suddenly softening. But you know. What's the difference from the Harrison Sullivan back then? These words were like a slap. Slapped hard across Aria Bennett's face, she staggered back a step, her chest heaving violently. Yes, when had she become like this for revenge? She could coldly watch Harrison Sullivan wither day by day, could precisely calculate his every ounce of pain, even enjoy his collapse. Wasn't this exactly what Harrison Sullivan did to her back then? Her voice choked. Julian Prescott sighed, reaching out to touch her cheek. Hatred burns too long, it will turn even yourself to ashes. Aria Bennett closed her eyes, a tear silently falling. Bang, the office door was pushed open violently. The secretary rushed in panic. President Lynn, Sullivan Group's old guard, has joined forces with 3 funds, maliciously acquiring our company's circulating shares. Aria Bennett snapped awake. When did this happen? Just half an hour ago. They've already acquired 12% of the shares and are still buying. The secretary handed over a tablet. This is a leader. And on the screen, Sullivan Group's former financial director was giving an interview, a cold smile on his face. And wise acquisition methods were controversial from the start. We're just setting things right, taking back what's ours. Aria Bennett clenched her fist, nails digging deep into her palm. Victor Blackwood, the financial director she had once turned ***, call a meeting immediately, formulate a response. Aria Bennett ordered coldly, and find out their funding source. No need. Julian Prescott suddenly interrupted her. Victor Blackwood was likely pretending to be swayed by you from the start. Aria Bennett turned sharply. What do you mean? Julian Prescott nodded, his expression complex. You thought he was Sullivan Group's man. But the biggest possibility is he's no one's man. He's out for his own benefit. Aria Bennett's mind raced. If that were the case, then this matter was simpler than she imagined. She suddenly grabbed her coat. Get the car. We're going to Sullivan Group. Julian Prescott frowned. What are you going there for? Aria Bennett didn't look back. To find Harrison Sullivan. Aria Bennett pushed the door open. Harrison Sullivan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back thin as a shadow. Hearing the sound, he slowly turned. A flicker of surprise passed through his eyes before settling into lifelessness. Rare guest. His voice was hoarse. President Lynn personally here to inspect work. Aria Bennett walked straight up to him, pushing the tablet forward. Explain. Harrison Sullivan glanced at the screen, frowning slightly. I don't know about this. Victor Blackwood is your man. Was. Harrison Sullivan looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. Just like I was once yours. Aria Bennett's breath hitched out after a moment of confrontation. She suddenly took a deep breath. I need you to help me resolve this. Harrison Sullivan was stunned. Outside, the rain grew heavier, water trails meandering on the glass like tears. Why? He asked softly. Aria Bennett was silent for a moment, giving an answer that surprised even herself. Because only you understand how Sullivan Group's old guard operates. That wasn't the whole truth. Half of Sullivan Group's former mid to high-level employees were still under her. But she wouldn't admit that the moment she saw his medical report, something had cracked inside her. Harrison Sullivan looked at her for a long time, then suddenly smiled, a tired but relieved smile. All right. He turned, took a document from a drawer, and handed it to her. This is a network and leverage I compiled on Sullivan Group's old guard. It's enough for you to counter them. Aria Bennett opened the file, her pupils contracting slightly. The information was extremely detailed, clearly not prepared recently. You anticipated this day? Harrison Sullivan didn't answer, just walked to the coat rack, took his suit jacket. Let's go. While I still remember how to be Mr. Sullivan. His back was straight, as if momentarily regaining some of his former sharpness. Perhaps this was the last thing he could do for her. Sullivan Group boardroom. Aria Bennett pushed the final document to the end of the long table. Your severance packages have been processed. She scanned the variously expression veterans, her voice calm. From today, Sullivan Group and you have no further ties. The financial director spoke tremulously. President Lynn, we've been with the Shen family for 30 years, which is why you're leaving with double compensation, with dignity. Aria Bennett lightly tapped the table. Instead of ending up like Chloe Winslet, counting stitches on a sewn face in prison. The room fell dead silent. In the corner, Harrison Sullivan hung his head, his suit still carrying the dampness from the rainy night. He remained silent throughout, like an empty shell. After the crowd dispersed, Harrison Sullivan remained seated unmoving. Something else. Aria Bennett closed the folder. He suddenly pressed his hand on the file, knuckles white. We really have no chance at all? Aria Bennett's gaze fell on his hand, a fresh one there. From when he smashed a mirror the previous night. She remembered years ago, when young Harrison Sullivan climbed the wall to bring her strawberries. His palm cut by the wire mesh, yet he smiled and said, it doesn't hurt. Do you know what I thought in that sack? She whispered. I thought? If you just looked back at me once. Just once. Harrison Sullivan's pupils contracted violently. But you didn't. Aria Bennett retrieved the file. So my answer is no. Not a shred. Julian Prescott's words suddenly echoed in her ears. He was right. The best outcome of revenge is complete forgetfulness. She turned towards the floor-to-ceiling window. Sunlight broke through the clouds, outlining her figure with a faint gold. A few days later, Aria Bennett suddenly received a video from an unknown number. In the footage, Harrison Sullivan knelt on steep stone steps, forehead pressed against the blue slate, performing 3 steps, 1 bow. Dark red bloodstains wound its way on the steps, his knees already ground to a bloody pulp. This was the temple where she once prayed for his Buddhist bees. In the background, an assistant's voice softly reported, "Mr. Sullivan has been kneeling for 3 days. The abbot said he's praying for, delete it." Aria Bennett closed the video. No need to report his matters anymore. She walked to the safe, took out an equity transfer agreement, signed it, paused, then pulled out a sticky note. The pen hovered for a long time, finally writing only 3 words, "We're even." When Harrison Sullivan received the document, he was lying in the temple's meditation room, burning with fever, his mind hazy. The abbot sighed, handing him hot tea. Benefactor, obsession hurts others and oneself. Trembling, he opened the document. The equity transfer agreement slipped out. The sticky note was lifted by the wind seeping through the window crack, lightly landing on his chest. In his daze, he remembered the year he turned 20. Aria Bennett waiting for him in the snow. Her nose tipped red from cold, yet smiling as she said, "Harrison Sullivan, I waited for you." And now, she had finally stopped waiting. Outside, the first snow of winter quietly fell. Julian Prescott's car stopped in front of a pure white building in the suburbs. Wanting to show you after it was completed, he opened the car door for her, his fingertip lightly scratching her palm. "But someone has been such a workaholic lately, I couldn't get an appointment." Aria Bennett raised an eyebrow. Is Dr. Prescott complaining, accusing? He lowered his head, nibbling her ear. "You've neglected me for 3 days and 7 hours." The building's interior was brightly lit. A crystal plaque at the corridor's end was covered with red silk. Julian Prescott suddenly covered her eyes from behind. Countdown 3 seconds. In the darkness, she heard the sound of fabric falling. Look now. The red silk fell. The engraved Aria Bennett Trauma Medicine Research Center shone brilliantly under the spotlights. "All profits will go into trauma and PTSD research." Julian Prescott's breath brushed her ear, including those old scars on her knees. Aria Bennett stared at the plaque, her throat tightening. The scars from kneeling for the prayer beads, he remembered them all. Coincidentally or not, the research center's lounge floor-to-ceiling window faced the old Sullivan Group building. Aria Bennett was checking data when she noticed light spots moving on the ceiling. Looking up, lines of fluorescent blue text flickered on the white wall. "Aria, the kite is stuck in the tree." Her whole body froze. This was the code Harrison Sullivan invented when they were 16. That day, he broke his arm retrieving her kite but smiled and said, "Aria, don't cry. It doesn't hurt." On the rooftop of the opposite building, a thin figure leaned against a railing, a laser pointer still swaying in hand. Even from 100 meters, she could recognize Harrison Sullivan wearing the school uniform from their first meeting. Like a stubborn ghost, the light spots continued moving, new words forming. "This time, I'll catch you." Aria Bennett watched quietly for 3 seconds, then suddenly stood and drew the curtains tight. As darkness enveloped the room, she dialed Julian Prescott's phone. "Come to the lounge now." She heard her own voice, unusually calm. "Bring the ring you hid in the second drawer of the changing room." A clattering sound came from the other end. "When did you find out?" Julian Prescott's breathing was noticeably flustered. Aria Bennett rubbed the sliver of light leaking through the curtain gap, a slight smile curling her lips. "Last time you secretly measured my ring size, you got chalk dust all over my hand." The laser from the opposite building still tried to pierce the curtains, casting faint spots on the floor. She stepped on the light, hearing hurried footsteps approaching from outside the door. "Julian Prescott." She suddenly called his full name. "I want you to come in and propose to me. Right now." The door was pushed open. He stood there, clutching a velvet ring box, panting heavily. But his eyes were bright. The laser flickered one last time at her feet, then completely went out. Aria Bennett's wedding dress had no intricate lace, just simple satin, shimmering like pearls under the moonlight. Julian Prescott wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, tie already loosened. He held her hand, exchanging rings on the observatory platform atop the Alps. Below were only a dozen close friends. The clinking of champagne glasses mixed with the mountain wind, crisp like the sound of shattering stars. "I thought you'd want a grander wedding." Julian Prescott kissed her fingertips. Aria Bennett looked towards the Milky Way. Those who have been in the spotlight know how precious quiet is. A waiter brought a mountain of gifts, among them an ebony box stood out. The moment Aria Bennett opened the lid, Julian Prescott clearly felt her fingers tremble. The Buddhist prayer beads Harrison Sullivan once gave to Chloe Winslet now lay quietly on velvet cloth. Each sandalwood bead glowed warmly, clearly having been rubbed for a long time. The attached card had only 7 words. "This time, I pray for your peace." Julian Prescott took the box and handed it to an assistant. "Donated to the temple." But Aria Bennett smiled, casually slipping the beads onto her bouquet. Might as well keep it as a cautionary tale. In the secure mental institution room, the TV played wedding news. Chloe Winslet's skeletal fingers clawed at the screen, nails splitting and bleeding unnoticed. "I'm the real Mrs. Sullivan," she screamed, smashing a glass. "Look, I'm prettier than her, right?" The guard watched coldly until she collapsed exhausted in a pool of blood, then dragged her back to bed like a dead dog. "Patient 0487 is acting up again." The nurse wrote on the record, "Self-harm incidents today. 7. As soon as she finished, Chloe Winslet screamed again, knocking over the mirror in front of her. "What is this? Who sent this? Who sent this?" Her face. The face 170% similar to Aria Bennett's, but all along he had already legally married someone else in secret. The guard looked at her coldly. "Anonymous donation by regulations. You must accept it." Chloe Winslet frantically scratched her own face until it was bloody. She recognized the smear. The frame was engraved with a line of small text. "Look at yourself now. Who do you still resemble?" Chloe Winslet frenziedly smashed the mirror against the wall, shards flying. Outside, a crow flew past the iron bars, its harsh cry sounding like a merciless mockery. In a temporary hospital in the African desert, Harrison Sullivan knelt, bandaging a child's wounds. The scorching sun had peeled the skin on the back of his neck. His expensive suits were long replaced with wrinkled linen shirts when the little boy timidly offered a dirty piece of candy. He remembered 18-year-old Aria Bennett. She always loved slipping strawberry hard candies into his textbooks. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A news headline notification. NY goes public today. Estimated market value exceeds 100 billion. As the lock screen lit up, the nurse was surprised to see this always silent Chinese doctor's phone wallpaper was actually a girl in a school uniform, turning back to smile under cherry blossoms. When the bell tolled, Julian Prescott set off fireworks on a New York rooftop, a listing gift. He hugged Aria Bennett from behind, chin on her shoulder. How does it compare to Harrison Sullivan renting the entire amusement park back then? She turned and kissed Julian Prescott. Far worse. You're 10 times handsomer than him. Fireworks exploded above them, illuminating Wall Street's never-extinguished lights of desire.